Elinor Hawthorne, and I was one of the two Salem witches whose lives were marked by the shadow of religious fanaticism and mass hysteria in 17th-century colonial America. Along with me, the other witch, whose real name I will not reveal for security reasons, will be known as Selene Blackwood. My story begins in old Europe, in a small town in England. I was an inquisitive and curious young woman from an early age. My mother told me stories about witches and sorcerers, stories that filled me with wonder and mystery. Secretly, I began to study the arts of magic and nature, following the teachings of my grandmother, who, in turn, had been accused of witchcraft and sentenced to the stake. This dark legacy marked me for life. Selene, on the other hand, was a young woman raised in the Netherlands. Her story is even more tragic. She was orphaned after her parents were murdered by native Indians, and she ended up in the Salem colony under the guardianship of the Reverend Samuel Parris. Selene's arrival in Salem marked the beginning of a bond that would change our lives forever. As religious fanaticism and paranoia take hold in Salem, secret sins, repressed desires, and mysterious stories begin to come to life. The figure of Tituba, the black slave of the Parris family, influenced our lives in an unexpected way. Her stories and her mysterious rituals clashed with Salem's puritanical morals, but Selene and I were mesmerized by her stories. We begin to explore forbidden magic and rituals in the dead of night, hidden from the prying eyes of Salem. Hysteria broke out when we were discovered in the forest performing voodoo rituals. Accusations of witchcraft flew like shadows in the night. Selene and I, along with other innocent souls, became victims of the collective paranoia that devastated Salem in 1692. Hysteria broke out when we were discovered in the forest performing voodoo rituals. Accusations of witchcraft flew like shadows in the night. Selene and I, along with other innocent souls, became victims of the collective paranoia that devastated Salem in 1692. The seizures and strange behaviors that afflicted the girls were actually attempts to hide our rituals and mystical experiences in the forest. But Salem believed in witches, and soon we found ourselves at the center of a cruel and merciless witch hunt. Public accusation and false trials led us to a terrifying fate. We were tortured and pressured to confess our sins and name other innocents. Any resistance was in vain. Salem had fallen under the spell of fanaticism and superstition. Selene and I were convicted. Tituba, the slave, was saved by confessing and accusing others. Our lives faded away in prison or on the gallows. Salem's shadow would never leave us. Years later, the courts admitted that the Salem trials had been a sham. Mass hysteria, puritanical oppression, and paranoia had led to the death of innocents. Salem's shadow became an indelible stain on the history of colonial America. My name is Elinor Hawthorne, and this is my story, a warning about the dangers of intolerance and bigotry in dark times. Through the shadows of Salem, I hope my voice serves as a reminder of the terrible consequences of mass hysteria and witch hunts in human history.
I am Selene Blackwood, and I have carried the darkness of Salem for years. Allow me to share with you my version of events, one that differs from what Elinor Hawthorne has told, one that weighs on my soul like an unsustainable burden. My life began in the Netherlands, where I lived with my parents until their violent death at the hands of native Indians left me without a home or family. The tragedy brought me to Salem, in the custody of the Reverend Samuel Parris. But what no one knew was that there was something dark and twisted inside me, a curse that I carried with me from my homeland. Elinor and I share an unusual curiosity, and together we explore the darkest corners of magic. I can't blame Tituba for his influence, but the darkness in me was always looking for a way out. Our exploration of forbidden rituals and voodoo was a reflection of my own darkest desires. The strange seizures and behavior in Salem were not an attempt to conceal innocent rituals, as Elinor implies, but rather manifestations of a curse she had acquired. My dreams were filled with unimaginable horrors, and the devil took over my nights. And yes, I confess that, in a moment of desperation, I let my nightmares come true. Salem became a hotbed of paranoia and fanaticism, and I soon found myself accused of witchcraft. The accusations seemed fair to me, because the darkness in me was real. The Inquisition and false trials drove me to the brink of madness. Not only was I accused of my own crimes, but I named others, dragging them into the abyss that consumed me. My confession, although painful, was the only way out I saw. I named other innocents, betraying their lives to save mine. Tituba, for his part, survived thanks to his confession and accusation. The lives of those I named faded away in prison or on the gallows, and that haunts me to this day. The years that followed saw the recognition of Salem's injustice, but the scars on my soul did not heal. Guilt for my role in those terrible events has become a shadow that has never left me. I am Selene Blackwood, and this is my side of the story, a confession of my own darkness and the betrayal of those who should never have been accused. May my story serve as a reminder of the terrible consequences of the evil that resides in the human heart.